Our next panel is digitization in the shipping and logistics industry, something that's getting to be more and more important and is absolutely vital to the success of the global supply chain generally. Moderated by my co-chair, Marina Hadjipateras, who is the co-founder and general partner of TMV, but is a highly learned and educated person, and she comes by it through a very distinguished family of ship owners going back literally centuries. Matt Heider is the CEO of Nautilus Labs, and he is joined by Karyl Fowler, CEO and co-founder of Transmute Industries, and Kyle Henderson, a founder of Vizion. Marina, you're in charge.
Hi, I'm Marina Hadjipateras, co-founder and GP at TMV, an early-stage venture capital fund dedicated to investing in purpose-driven founders across supply chain, shipping, work, sustainability, care, and education. And welcome to the HACC-NACC panel dedicated to digitization in the shipping and logistics industry, where we're joined by 3 entrepreneurs who are bringing innovation and new technology to an age-old industry, shipping and logistics. I'm joined by Karyl Fowler, CEO and co-founder at Transmute, where her team is leveraging decentralized identity technology to secure global trade and enterprise supply chains. Matt Heider, CEO of Nautilus Labs, the technology firm advancing the efficiency of ocean commerce through artificial intelligence, and Kyle Henderson, founder and CEO of Vizion, which supports digital transformation in supply chain and logistics by providing web services and data streams that power door-to-door visibility solutions. First, thank you all for being here and joining us on this panel today. It's thanks to entrepreneurs like you that the shipping and logistics world is becoming more efficient, increasing optimization, creating cost savings, and increasing sustainability. I'd like to start by talking about each one of your origin stories and how you found yourself in this old industry and working in ways to try and change it and bring it up to the 21st century. And I'll start with Karyl and then head over to Kyle and Matt, but we'd love to hear your origin stories.
Yeah, thank you so much for including me, Marina. I'm really excited to be here, and thanks to all the listeners tuning in. So as Marina mentioned, my company Transmute is working on a verifiable data platform for global trade. And that's a lot of technical jargon we're trying to digitize some of the more manual components involved in moving goods specifically across global borders. And to get really specific, what we're doing today is digitizing the proof of origin credentials involved in the steel, automotive, and microelectronics industries. And in terms of our origin story, one reason that we're so focused on these spaces is we're Texas-based, where a lot of the major ports for steel and these types of commodities, including automotive, are located. And my background in particular is in the semiconductor space, where there are highly opaque supply chains that are opaque oftentimes out of necessity. So the United States finds ourselves in a position where the majority of these commodity structures originate in China and Taiwan. So how do you infuse trust for all of the various components that are going in to a microelectronic system or a piece of steel infrastructure when you're relying on hundreds, if not thousands, of suppliers involved in that supply chain, as well as suppliers who may come from less than trusted trading partners. And for our company, the use of decentralized identity technology actually allows us to infuse trust into these ecosystems. And what I mean when I say that is trust is just a data comparison. So how can we provide digital proof points that persist across an entire ecosystem, even after the point of consumption of that product? So what we're doing is digitizing some of these manual processes such that that is the case. And we can tell when goods now move across our borders. We can compare what's being claimed about that asset at the point of shipment, at the point of customs, and at the point of the end customer taking custody of those goods. We can compare what's being claimed about those assets over time.
Thanks, Karyl. And Kyle, we'd love to hear from you.
Thanks, Marina. So I found myself in this industry a little by accident in some sense. I did not come from shipping and logistics. I came from analytics, consumer market research, user experience. and mapping. And after I exited my last venture several years ago, I connected with several individuals who had just finished up their graduate program at Stanford, and they had enticed me to check out this industry of international containerized freight, because they said it is has a long way to go in terms of digitization. It could be an opportunity. They enticed me so much that I worked with them for 2 years, getting to speak with many of the executives across the largest freight forwarders, carriers, many of the BCOs, et cetera, and learning about the pain points around international freight. What projects were they attempting? What was succeeding? What was not succeeding? And realized that at the end of it, that accessing any data around your ocean freight was extremely difficult, costly, and simply just not done. And we found it to be very challenging, because if you can't get data, then you can't really build software. And if you can't bring software to the space, then we aren't really going to be successful at taking it to the next evolution. So that idea stuck with me. And me and my co-founder, over some beers in San Francisco one evening, we're talking about our next projects. And I threw out this idea of, hey, what if we made it easy to get this data so that you could actually build this next generation software? He liked the idea. We started noodling on it, and we found that, one, if we solved the problem of easy access, there were immediately customers who were going to come on board. And two, if we cleaned it and enriched it and added additional data to it to make it really useful for the business need, the use cases the companies have, that it was almost premium priced. So bootstrapped it for about a year as a side project, just as a little something fun to do. And when we started having BCOs right after COVID started spinning up in a pretty big way in March or so, BCOs who were showing up with 300,000, 400,000 containers a year, saying that they were desperate in need of a data stream. We thought to ourselves, hey, maybe we should double down on this side project a little bit. And that was April of 2020. Since then, raised a round of venture funding, blew up the team, shipped multiple new product updates, and today we're working with 2 of the top 10 largest freight forwarders, a number of software companies in the space, and a few BCOs, and looking to get our name out there even more. And I'm very appreciative for the time to speak on this panel.
Thanks, Kyle. Over to you, Matt.
Thanks, Marina, and nice to hear from both Kyle and Karyl on this front. Personally, I'm Matt. I'm the CEO at Nautilus Labs. What brought me to this space was, a decade ago, I was working at IBM on some of the early use cases for Watson, and looking at the ways that machine learning and artificial intelligence could help people make better decisions in their day-to-day life. Some very early applications in the financial services space. You fast forward to 2016, 2017, and started looking in ocean shipping, principally because of the scale of emissions inside of our industry, right? It's a massive emitter of greenhouse gases. We have a deep conviction inside Nautilus that has to change, that our industry has to become more efficient. And we also believe that the way to get there is by companies leveraging data to make more efficient decisions and achieve competitive advantage. And we think if we can close that loop between data-driven decision-making, more efficient operations, competitive advantage in the market, over the course of time, that will lead to a more efficient industry that consumes less fuel and produces fewer greenhouse gas emissions over the course of time. So we've been, incredibly fortunate the last 4 years building this business. We've raised a few rounds of venture capital. Our team is now based between New York, Singapore, and Paris. And we're working with some of the largest companies in the industry across every segment that exists inside ocean shipping, helping with fleet optimization, helping with decision support, and actually able to quantify the greenhouse gas emissions that we're conserving with our clients' help. So that's what brought us here. That is our North Star, and that's the thing that we still stay focused on every day, is how can we help drive better decision-making that reduces greenhouse gases.
Thanks, Matt. So, it is really about becoming more efficient, optimizing, ROI and sustainability. And I think that's, and transparency and privacy as well. And so that's really leading the way and trying to push things forward and bridging that gap between such an old industry. But to that end, it's noted that over a quarter of transportation and logistics companies have no digital strategy in place. And I believe this coming from a shipping background before VC. But I wonder, one, if you could maybe talk a little bit about why you think this is the case. I have my thoughts too. And then also why now things are moving forward and what hurdles we see in order to get 100% of companies to have a digital strategy in place, because it's moving in that direction. But I'd love to maybe start with Kyle.
Yeah, thanks, Marina. So there was a question inside your question, your prompt about, why is the shipping industry at its current state of digitization, even compared to other industries? And I think the reality of it is the combination of the absolute complexity of this industry compared to others, right? You cover every geography, and therefore you have to cover almost every situation. And the nature of the industry and even how it developed, even before there really was much digitization even available, it's a professional services industry. It's a relationship management industry. It's, I have someone I know who's over in the port in Vietnam, and that's my connection, et cetera, et cetera. And that's how it's been for decades and decades and decades. Well, when you talk about, and I don't mean this in the sense of like bureaucracy, but this is an extremely faceted, complex international engine trying to move these goods around. And it's very difficult to deploy large-scale digitization solutions because it has to be highly specialized and localized for everything. And I don't even mean localized for the specific country or region or province, to the company quite often, right? Because all of these companies built up different business operations. They built up different ways that they measure and understand their business over time before digitization was really a thing. And so today we have a situation where it's almost outside pressure, and now more so opportunity is driving the priority around digitization. Certainly on the consumer side, that Amazon effect has changed the expectations of everyone because, if you're human, you're a consumer in some way today, and you understand, the benefits of prime shipping, and it gets there next day. And this started, moving backwards up the supply chain quite often. If you wanted to be able to ensure next day delivery, you needed to ensure that you had those goods in your warehouse and distribution center, and you need to ensure that your inventory that's moving on the water. So these outside pressures for digitization and a higher level of performance and a higher level of visibility have driven the priorities quite often across this industry in the last few years to be able to offer better relationships between businesses with data feeds, better relationships between teams with collaborative platforms and interfaces. It allows you to focus on the exception, allows you to focus on how can we restructure, organize, and optimize all of the bits and pieces that have to interface with one another. So it was a industry that was too complex to easily digitize, and now outside forces have changed the priority of digitization. And then, to be really honest, COVID has even upgraded that priority even more, because you had an interruption of professional services, you had an interruption of the actual flow, and then you had this 10, 20x explosion in the need of shippers and receivers to understand when are those goods going to be arriving. And you just didn't have hands at keyboards answering those questions like you used to. So digitization was a priority, but is now very much in those top three of the executive suite when you talk to shipping companies. What is our digital strategy? Are we going to create a digital strategy? And you see this in large and small as well. And so there's talks about can these companies shift to an asset-free type company? Can they be more digital? Can these companies address their foundational, digital foundation, so that they can not just get the basics in place, but ensure that their basics allow them to build the advanced and then the highly competitive and differentiated digital solutions that their customers are asking for. So I think it's certainly not a situation where you'd call it anyone's fault. It's just, it was a boat that was too big to turn for so long, And now the pressures of the outside world, the storm at seas, has really pushed the captain to say, we got to make a different change. We have to function different than we were. Because nowadays, honestly, it's, you know, it's change or goodbye. So that's where we're at today. But I'd love to hear Matt and Karyl, what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, Karyl, do you want to jump in?
Yeah, so I agree with everything that Kyle said. In terms of digitization and what's driving it, at Transmute, we're kind of seeing this in three categories. It's the consumer demand. The market's demanding more real-time data. In the case of verifiable data, they want real proof points that the good is original and says it is what they're purportedly being sold. But they also want to know with certainty that something is certified organic or made with ethical labor, for instance. So there's a lot more, a much bigger burden of proof on brands to come forth with more transparency around their operations at the exact same moment that the world is facing together how brittle our supply chains are when it comes to crisis management and resiliency. And then finally, a kind of ballooning burden of compliance, specifically here in the US when we look at the new NAFTA or the US CMA. I know every country has a different acronym. In the steel space, some of SEMA's new regulations, basically the result of these regulations is that an automaker no longer has to prove just who sent them that part, but where the material originated every moment that it was transformed, which is generally multiple different sites. You can't build a car with one facility. And these things combined are like Kyle mentioned, driving companies' attention to digitization as really the only solution. But I think what's really exciting is because it's such an archaic space, especially in the commodity spaces that we're focused on, they have an opportunity to leapfrog and bridge some of the digital silos that have been created prior and use some emerging technology to do that. And I think the other thing I'll say in terms of the challenge of digitization, when we're talking about, speaking for Transmute here, moving things across global borders, you can't do that without acknowledging and comprehending the regulators' needs. Not only what their needs are in terms of just the regulatory requirements, but what is their digital strategy? Where are they at today? Are they even accepting some of these things in a digital format? And if so, what does that need to look like? And we work with Department of Homeland Security as one of our primary customers and working on specifically the steel proof of origin application. And something that we've come to realize is that historically there hasn't been a digital solution that both addresses both of the competing needs of the regulator and competing needs of the commercial enterprise. And what I mean when I say that is a regulator like CBP, a customs clearinghouse, has to increase facilitation. So they need to make sure commercial trade happens swiftly and efficiently while increasing their enforcement activity. So usually if you do one of those things well, the other one suffers. And we're just now facing a situation where we have digital solutions that can balance those things. And the reflection of that on the commercial market side is that they need to increase efficiency. They need the business process optimization and new lines of revenue, but they also need to mitigate the risk of non-compliance and lost goods and counterfeit goods. And generally those things somewhat compete. And so I think all three of us are talking about solutions that for the first time positively impact all of those things at once. And that we just haven't had the tools to do that before.
Thanks so much, Karyl. Matt, we'd love to hear your point of view here too.
Yeah, I mean, those are both two great sets of observations. I think there's a lot of truth. If I were just going to take a step back and frame in the context specifically of ocean shipping, there's kind of three things that have held back digitalization over the course of time. I think there's this cultural component. This industry has always imbued a lot of trust in distributed teams. The master was at sea, the chief engineer was at sea, and they're entrusted to make the right decision and empowered to do that fully with minimal intervention. I think that's something that COVID has kind of brought into starker relief as all the teams inside of shipping companies have gone distributed, is they felt the inefficiency that can derive from those type of barriers. And so I think we're seeing organizations push past that. There's also culturally this long sense of history inside of ocean shipping, right? They think about industrial transformation in the context of centuries and moving from steam to internal combustion to the digitization that occurred back in the 70s when computers first started being used for any sort of digital record keeping. And so there's always been this reticence to embrace solutions too early and wanting to see very clearly what the ROI is and why they're going to buy a solution for the value they can get today, rather than taking a more exploratory approach to pursuing new ideas. But I think that links really interestingly with some of the change that's happening and how some of the structural change that's happening in the industry is really allowing and empowering companies to move faster. I think, both Karyl and Karyl talked about the way that there are silos in our industry. And I think it's true on board a ship, it's true with shoreside teams, and it's true across the global supply chain because of the patchwork of regulations and regulatory bodies and stakeholders who are interested. Each port is a silo, each ship is a silo, and every company is surely a silo. But there are major changes that are occurring that are driving that change. I think the Poseidon Principles as one that is sort of pushing organizations towards clearer accountability around their environmental footprint is driving better use of data and technology. If you look at the IMO and what's coming out of the International Maritime Organization in terms of not just the 2020 regulation, which is now passed, but 2030 and getting to 2050, it's requiring the use of more technology to make better insights about ships and to really track carbon down to the unit of cargo that's being transferred at any point in time on a much more granular basis. And I think ultimately what that sets the industry up for is the commercial change that's needed to really drive digitization. There's never been in a commercial negotiation between charters and owners historically incentive placed on more efficient operations or opening up data or serving better in that way the mutual relationship where collaboration can really drive efficiency. And I think that these other structural changes are really pushing businesses to think differently about how they can collaborate, are pushing shipping companies specifically to adopt technology that helps them collaborate better with other stakeholders and ultimately break down those silos that persist across all these disparate geographies and stakeholders.
Thanks, Matt. And so we have 5 minutes left, and I have a few more questions I'd love to ask. I think this has been a really great discussion so far because I feel like we've gone a little bit from the history of where things were, why they were that way, and then moving forward into what we're doing to change them and how, there's a collaborative effort to do that from all different aspects, from clients to ship owners to technology. I think everyone's coming together, and I think to that end, Karyl, I think I'd love to go a little bit deeper into what Transmute uses. They have an open source and decentralized identity management solution. And I think I'd love to talk a little bit about what that actually is and how that's moving the needle forward.
Yeah, absolutely. So the technology that we're using that Marina's referring to is called decentralized identifier technology. And it's just a fancy technical term for public key cryptography. So we're applying public key infrastructure in a decentralized way, such that when you sign a document, maybe it's a certified mill test report, some other sort of proof of origin or commercial or customs invoice, it feels like you're signing a DocuSign or something like that. But what's actually happening on the back end is you're signing this with your cryptographic keys, such that there's effectively a watermark or a timestamp that now persists across the entire supply chain ecosystem. And the kind of broader vision, which a lot of us have mentioned on this line, is we want high integrity data that companies can make dynamic decisions about. We want agile supply chains. So I think of us moving from kind of a critical chain method world to more of like an octopus, such that when something like COVID happens again, you can make really dynamic decisions about what to do within your supplier network because you have ironclad data about those suppliers' reputations, availability, reliability, et cetera. And part of why these technologies have been really important in our solution is in our work with Department of Homeland Security. as well as the authorities in Canada, some in the EU, as well as in Asia Pacific, have signed on to the World Wide Web Consortia standards for decentralized identifier and verifiable credential technology. And these mentions of this technology are starting to come up in some of the new trade agreements about the kinds of digital credentials that will be accepted at ports of entry moving forward. So they don't just want digital documents, they want digital proof points that the thing that's being imported today that says it's coming from XYZ country was actually from XYZ country. And that is something that we cannot verify today. And specifically in the steel space, it is conducted in a non-standard way, entirely on paper. And when you think about the inefficiencies created by that, I think are really easy for everyone on this call to think about. But when you think of it in terms of national security interests, this is steel that is going into our cars, our commercial buildings, and to other types of infrastructure. This is steel that should be tariffed appropriately. These are the kinds of challenges that solves. But the broader challenge that the infrastructure solves are around not just efficiency, but also data privacy and ownership. So the same way you hear often with things like GDPR, the right to be forgotten, and kind of personal ownership, enterprises, and in particular logistics enterprises who rely on long-standing built relationships and routes that are proprietary to them, how do you incentivize them, to Matt's point, to be more transparent if we're using solutions that expose them? We can't do that. And then the final thing I'll say that's part of that open standards work that we've been leading for a while now under the W3C and the Decentralized Identity Foundation is interoperability. And when I was prepping for this call, Matt, I saw a lot of references to that on your website as well. I think interoperable solutions that span these data silos and integrate with how companies are doing things today is really the key in this space, regardless of the rest of your underlying stack.
Thanks, Karyl. So we have a little under a minute, and so I figure we could do like a really big quick fire on the ROI, the greatest ROI digitization opportunity. I'd love to just know, like in a few words, what you think drives the partnerships and the contracts to get through the door, not only in your opinion, but what is it that is incentivizing everyone? Is it the sustainability aspect, because we're all held accountable now because of sustainability? Is it optimization? Is it cost savings? So just a really quick, I'll start with Matt, then head to Kyle, and then Karyl.
So really quick, I think from our perspective, it's dollars saved at the end of the day. So it's still about, can you either drive a revenue increase or a cost decrease? More often a cost decrease if we're talking about mitigating fuel consumption. And when you can tether your solution to those types of direct outcomes, it's a very tangible, specific, and scalable ROI model for the buyer. So I think that comes first. And I think that these other imperatives around emissions, tracking, understanding how your business is functioning, I think that only drives more attention to where the waste is occurring and where you could be improving your operations and saving those extra dollars, or, in certain market environments, capturing some additional revenue with your ship. Thanks,
Matt. Kyle?
I think it's all electronic platforms and agreeing on the integration standards, because they're mechanisms that drive change by their nature. If you are going to be trying to move towards an assetless opportunity, getting digital is the key. It's going to help you also reduce your costs in supporting your customers. It's going to help you improve your ability to capture customer business, e-booking platforms, et cetera. It fundamentally makes you have to address the data schema underneath your entire business. And if you get those things right, then you've opened future doors for the next innovations. Because if you try to build the next thing on top of that, it's going to fall down if the base isn't ready.
Completely. And Karyl?
I agree with everything that Matt and Kyle said. The thing I think once you're past, you've accounted for both of those things, I think making sure that the data and insights you're providing are actionable. Mm-hmm. I think these are businesses that want to make dynamic decisions in real time, and that's where the strategic value and the long-term investment comes into play.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for being here. I think we're going to open up the floor now for some Q&A from different audience members.
Hello and welcome back. And now we'll go to the live Q&A for the digitization panel, digitization in shipping and logistics industry. And we'll go to Marina. Marina?
Great. Well, thanks again, everybody. As we move into the Q&A, our first question comes from Captain Melbourne Pink. Will the flag admin class consider a tech digital solution to comply with GHG reductions in lieu of an engine manufacturer's modification, which is likely to be exorbitantly expensive, yet deliver the same, if not subordinate result? So I'll start off here with Matt.
Sure, and just hi, Mel. Good to hear from you, and appreciate the question. It's really an interesting topic. The flag states, class societies play such a venerable and venerated role in the industry in terms of ensuring that vessels are efficient and safe, and that's really the thing that's critically important for them. So, I think when we project out, we look at efficiency targets and where the industry wants to get in the next 20 years, 30 years, there's no doubt that that should be comprehensive of all the levers that are available to reduce fuel consumption, reduce emissions. And what we see every day at Nautilus is that there are tangible operational outcomes that can be taken advantage of in order to drive towards those economic outcomes and create a more efficient business. So certainly we want to see the evolution of different types of power supplies for vessels and green power. And we want to see more efficient hull forms and propeller modifications and technical improvements that can improve fuel efficiency. And we believe that the future is certainly one of varied fuel choice and of other types of fuels becoming available that will help to reduce the carbon footprint of the industry. And also what has to be considered is, as you baseline performance, as you look back at how an organization used to perform and how it can perform today into the future, you have to consider that daily decision making that produces a substantial amount of fuel waste. So we certainly advocate for that. We certainly see, in some cases with class societies in particular, them extending their own footprints into the solution space. We think that's a little bit of risky territory because they should be the source of truth around verification and assurance, and that shouldn't conflict with their provision of services as well. But we think that is absolutely a part of what the future will hold in the industry, and will just take time for the consideration of those types of solution adoption effects to be folded into the way that baseline and tracking of improvements occurs.
Thanks, Matt. And Kyle and Karyl, feel free to jump in if there's anything you wanted to add too. Otherwise, we can head to the next question.
Nothing to add to that one. Thanks,
Okay.
Marina.
Mayday. I got nothing on that topic.
Okay, great. So our next question is, given your experience and some of the hurdles you faced early on in this industry, what advice do you have for entrepreneurs trying to break into the shipping and supply chain industry? So maybe we'll start with Karyl.
Yeah, thanks, Marina. So just a brief personal story of Transmute entering the supply chain space, and in particular, where we work on moving goods across custom borders where customs regulators are involved. We are definitely the technologists. And so we have spent a lot of time listening to the industry and studying how some of our competition and friends have attempted to bring the entire ecosystem to the table, even though our industry is definitely the technology experts. And so I think the major piece of advice is learn the standards and processes that are already in existence. Spend a ton of time with your target market and the customers, listening to how they're managing things today. In many cases, because we're working with commodities manufacturers and specifically metals manufacturers, a lot of these processes are either partially digitized or still tracked in Excel in a lot of cases. And if we came in with our really fancy blockchain-based solution without understanding that, we would have just been dead on arrival. And so I think as technologists, there's technical standards and those types of things. But on the flip side, in terms of shipping, logistics, there are already incumbent industry standards and regulations and processes. And if you don't know them, then your solution will not be built to fit where your customers are today.
Thanks, Karyl. Kyle, do you want to add anything in there?
Yeah, I'd say find decision makers and go ask stupid questions. Figure out what is causing them pain, or maybe a better question is ask them how have their priorities changed in the last few years, maybe specifically around digitization and tech. Understand why are they prioritizing X, Y, Z? Why do they deprioritize certain things? And then just be straightforward. Tell them, you're interested in maybe starting a company in this space, and you'd love to maybe connect with some of their operational team members or their technology team members and get into the details of how you could execute or build a solution, or even identify what are they willing to outsource and let someone else solve that problem for them. Go and talk to companies, go to talk to decision makers, find the types of companies you would like to be your customer, and then understand, are there enough companies out there you could serve, and do you think that's you could build a valuable solution? But most things start with conversations.
Yep, completely. Matt, do you want to add anything into?
Yeah, I would I would echo that. I mean, I think it's certainly, to me, the one word that I would use is partnership. And I think it's true absolutely on the market development side, client development side, and really understanding the pain point, ensuring you're building in the right direction there. And I think also with allied service providers, that's been something that was really important to us from our early days, was knowing that we couldn't do the whole thing ourselves. We couldn't build sensors and sensor the ship and figure out data transmission and get it back to shore. It just wasn't a problem that we could scale solving. We knew we could scale the analytics challenge. And so making sure that you're starting early with accepting that you're gonna have to rely on others who have complementary strengths to help to get you to success. And that's true on both the client side and in other parts of your go-to-market strategy.
Thanks. Okay, so next question is around sustainability, and what are some of the sustainability initiatives on the horizon that you're already working on into going to work into your business? So let me just repeat that. What are some of the sustainability initiatives on the horizon that you are already working into going into work into your business? We had the 2020 regulations, and we're looking towards 2050. And I just love to know already what you're looking at, what you're working on now, even if it'll occur later on. I'll start with Matt again.
Sure, and so it's a fascinating topic, because emissions in 2021 is actually a primary topic of conversation and consideration when talking with our clients. And I think that really wasn't true 3 or 4 years ago. And that's driven by a bunch of externalities and market realities, and it's really amazing to see. And so we kind of break the problem down into a few different discrete spaces. We certainly are collaborating with some clients on the reporting and compliance aspect. How do we make sure that their emissions numbers are accurate, and which you really can't do with noon-based reporting, and trying to extrapolate that out across the entire fleet. That's certainly interesting and table stakes, and it checks box number 1 of the compliance problem, which is, can you meet the compliance reporting requirements that exist and that are coming out? I tend to think that where it gets even more interesting is in actual emissions reductions, and that's internally with our clients this year. That's where we have a big part of our focus, is actually capturing what the savings are, documenting that in reported and structured fashion, ensuring that our clients are able to leverage that information. Because as we look out at the near-term requirements around ship efficiency, and the prior panel talked about this at length, there are certainly ways relative to baseline, and particularly relative to 2008 baseline, where these types of operational efficiency improvements will draw a marked reduction in greenhouse gases, whether it's around ETA optimization, generator optimization, or these types of areas. So I think that's really where we're focused today, is not just the reporting aspect, but really, how can we actually impact emissions and document their reduction year over year.
Thanks, Matt. Karyl, do you want to add anything to that?
Yeah, so since we're working primarily with manufacturers and initially on creating digital and verifiable trade documents that move across borders and through a supply chain ecosystem really easily, we're starting with some of the things that are already regulated. Something that is new, at least in the steel and automotive space, is this concept of melt and pour. So you no longer just prove the point of origin of where the thing was supposedly made or shipped out of, but you also need to prove the points of origin where that material was transformed. But something that we're seeing with our commercial customers as we move down that path is that there are other things that their customers demand verifiable proof of. Things like certified organic, for instance, if we're talking about a totally different product class, or proving ethical or sustainable trade or working conditions and practices. And so we're really focused on building a product that's flexible enough to support the future where those data points are also of high integrity and verifiable all the way through the supply chain.
Thanks, Karyl. And Kyle?
Yeah, ours might be pretty simple, but since Vizion helps our customers connect their purchase order to the container to the BL to the ship, and more importantly, since we provide door-to-door visibility, any mode it moves across, our priority is to work with great partners to source the data about the carbon impact of those modes, and then be able to deliver back to our customers not just the tracking events about their inventory, but how many carbon credits do they need to utilize to counteract transporting those goods? Or when this container has moved across a ship and then moved across a diesel electric train and then has moved across a drayage truck over the 8,000 miles it covered, how much carbon was emitted? So our goal is to start lacing that data into our tracking data so that you can start rolling up even an answer to the basic question of how much carbon are we burning?
Thanks, Kyle. Okay, so our last question that came in is, what kind of connections are you looking for at this stage in your company's growth? Karyl, I'll start with you.
Yeah, so what we're looking on, and as you heard in the panel, we're working very closely with the regulators as our initial customer, and we've comprehended their needs, but the commercial needs are arguably even more important because the regulators don't get the kind of data that they need without the commercial industry adopting. And so for the next 12 to 18 months, we're really focused on some key customer and partner relationships with manufacturers who are moving largely steel across U.S. borders to understand how we can actually measure the impact, not just cost savings and the efficiency gains of digitization, but also what does it mean when you have a year's worth of very high integrity data about the sources of the components you're selling, the components that are embedded within those products and components, so your tier 1 and tier 2 suppliers, and what kinds of decisions can you make in real time or in times of crisis like we've experienced in the last year. There just aren't KPIs yet that exist to measure those things because we haven't seen it before. So we're really focused on how to measure that value.
Yeah, so really gathering data in order to serve your customers eventually. And Matt, what about you? I mean, early on, we worked very closely together. And doing the same thing, gathering a lot of data so that we could, so that you could, in a boutique sense, really serve what our needs were and what the pain points were that existed. But what about now, as Nautilus is about 3 years old now, 3.5 years old?
I think the biggest evolution is, to date, up until probably 2020, we work predominantly with forward-thinking owners who operate their vessels on where the efficiency gains lies. And what we've seen in the last 12 months is this kind of dramatic evolution where counterparties across the industry are sharing more data and collaborating around data more effectively because there isn't that built-in incentive in most contracts to deliver around transparency, but there is an economic benefit to supporting relationships down the road and building more constructive long-term partnerships. And so we're still focused on that, is bringing more forward-thinking owners into the platform, more forward-thinking charters into the platform, and technical managers as well, the folks who really do see the same world that we do, where operational efficiency rests on better decision-making, and bringing them into the fold on the Nautilus platform.
Makes sense. And Kyle?
Connections we're trying to build are very much with data providers and then now with cargo owners. Most of the companies we've worked with in terms of customers have been more on the software side or on the LSP side. So companies either building software to sell it or building software for their teams to use or their customers to use. But now we're seeking to connect more directly with the cargo owners because we solve some problems for them in terms of the data sourcing, as well as we're looking to bring in new data provider partners to help bring in the rest of the data you need to solve a very specific business problem. You know, just giving you status events on a container shipment isn't the solution by itself, but customizing that data with AIS vessel tracking, connecting directly to terminals, connecting directly to drayage, TMS platforms, and pulling the data together to help you minimize detention and demurrage. That's actually a solution that requires multiple partners. And BCOs care about many of those problems. So we're looking to connect with BCOs and more data providers.
Okay. Thank you so much again, Matt, Karyl, and Kyle, for participating. Looks like we're out of time, and this concludes the panel on digitization in the shipping and logistics industry.
Thank you, Marina. Great panel and great Q&A there. We're going to go now to a commercial, and then we'll come back for the one fully live panel of the day, which is going to be Shipowner Conversation and Clay's intro to that. Stay tuned.
Adapting to change is the hallmark of quality customer service. The Marshall Islands Fleet Operations Team quickly adapted inspection procedures to ensure safe vessel operations as COVID-19 travel restrictions prevented physical inspections. Since March 25, 2020, our team has completed more than 900 remote inspections worldwide. While nothing can replace the value of physical inspections, the use of remote inspections has been a resounding success. Remote inspections have eased the burden on crew, improving the Marshall Islands Registry's engagement with ship managers, and enabled the registry to positively influence behavior regarding safety and vessel operations. Our inspectors are glad they are able to get back on board ships in those jurisdictions that allow for it, but until then, the remote inspections tools will continue to be used. As the world's leading registry, we will continue to adapt and innovate to meet global challenges, protecting the safety of cargo, vessels, crew, and the marine environment. For more information on how we've addressed the COVID-19 challenges, please visit our website at www.register-iri.com.